Hello, my name is Steve and I want to welcome you to this introductory video on how to work together as a team. In this video, we're going to show you how to reduce your stage volume, how to clearly hear yourself and sound amazing by using the simple techniques of orchestration. So get ready to take a lot of notes, and it's okay to go back and watch it over and watch it over and watch it over and watch it over again. Hopefully by the 17th time you watch it, you'll think that my jokes are funny, if you don't think that they're funny already. Okay, so here we go. Let's dive in. That was me. That wasn't funny. Okay. Big idea number one, mind expansive moment, is don't do the same thing. Now maybe that's a little too simple. When it comes to music, we often do as much as we possibly can individually and hope that the person next to us who's doing as much as they can individually and the person next to them who's doing as much as they can individually will all sound good. And if it doesn't sound good, whose fault is it? It must be the sound guy's fault. It must be that we don't have enough gear. And what we're going to walk you through today is show you that it's really about your parts and how will you work together. So when you're on a team, you don't do everything yourself. You only do your part. And you make sure that you work together with the other people on your team who do their part, and together it makes something great. And you don't have to be great at the whole thing. You don't even have to know how to do the whole thing by yourself. All you have to be good at is knowing what to play and doing that part well. So in order to work as a team, we have to know what parts we need to divide and how does that all work. Otherwise, we may have a good team spirit, go team, yay. But if we don't know what to do, then it's difficult to actually accomplish anything. So what are the parts? The parts are chords, rhythm, melody, complementary rhythm, and counter melody if you pre-script it all ahead of time. So it's those 5 things, and for most people it will only be 3 things, working together in simplicity that makes great music in all styles and all genres across the globe. So we're going to walk you through the concepts of how to make great music. Let's walk downstairs. Take the escalator or the elevator. So let's go over the 3 basic parts of music. They are rhythm, chords, and melody. Rhythm is defined as the initial hit of your instrument. So the sound of the strings being plucked by a pick. The hammers on a piano hitting the strings when you push down on the keys. The drumstick slapping the drum head or the cymbals. That sound in repetition is what we call rhythm. The second part is chords. Chords are 2 or more notes played together at the same time. So one note would be just this, and that's not a chord. 2 notes together, this, that's a chord. 3 notes, 6 notes. Chords can be simple, chords can be complex, chords can be pretty, chords can be ugly, and even uglier. They all have names, but for now, all you need to know is chords are 2 or more notes played together at the same time. The third part is melody. Melody is 1 note right after another. This would be a melody. Now there is the melody, which is the famous part of any song. So Shout to the Lord by Darlene Checkenhill songs. Do, 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 do. So vocalists sing the melody, or a melody, or if over the top of all of that beautiful singing, you have a guitar player giving you one of those, that is also a melody. So when it comes to music, what we want to do is divide those 3 basic sections up amongst our players. We want to have somebody who's doing the rhythm, somebody who's doing the chords, and somebody who's doing the melody. Now that you know what the 3 basic parts of music are, we're going to spend some time going through each one of them and learning how we share those with other people and how we play simple parts that work well together. So let's begin with rhythm. We're here to talk to you about rhythm. And to help us with our simple demonstration, we have our son and drummer, Taylor, who's currently 11, and we have our son and bass player, Michael, who's currently 9. So what we're going to do is clap on 2 and 4. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Now at this point, it's impossible for you to distinguish who's clapping from everybody else. And that's because of the simple reason we're all doing the exact same thing. Now what happens is most people try to distinguish themselves with volume. So we try and get louder, but you still can't hear each other. You can only hear one sound because we're all doing the same thing. Once we start to do something different, you can hear it very easily. So Shawn's going to clap on 1 and 3. She can clap super quiet, and you can still hear her because she's doing something different. To further be able to make a difference, let's have Taylor clap on the upbeats. And you can hear him super well even if he claps quietly, because he as well is doing something different. Now Michael and I are still doing the same thing, so when I stop, now you can hear Michael, no problem. It's much quieter, and you're able to hear everyone. Round of applause, everybody.
Hi, this is Shawn, and I'm going to talk to you about chords. The first thing we're going to talk about is playing thin. Most instrumentalists like to have as much sound as they possibly can and play with all their fingers and as many strings as they can just because it sounds good and it's fun. But when you're playing with a group, you have to remember that you have to share the chord and share the notes, so you need to play with less sound and less fingers. So that goes for guitar players as well. You don't need as many pedals on all the same time, and you gotta play less strings. You just want to keep it simple, less notes, and less sound.
That's a big and full sound, but it's too much for if we're playing in a group, because I'm not leaving any room for the other people in my group to play or be heard. And they're probably doing the same thing to you. So what you have to do is figure out who has the chords, and then where are we going to play the chords, because if the melody is up here, then I don't want to play these notes in my chord. I want to leave this space for the lead instrument, the melody instrument. If my vocalists are singing, and they're singing right here, I want to try to avoid playing these notes too much. And if my bass player is down here, I want to avoid playing those notes as well, which in this case leaves me only a small range here. Which this may sound simple, but it's usually the correct part, because this note and this note are being played by the bass guitar. These notes up here are being played by a lead instrument, and these notes in here are the notes that are being sung. So again, it's not that you can't play the notes that are being sung, because it's helpful for reference, but we don't want to be playing them a lot. Otherwise you won't be able to hear your vocalists very well. And again, it all becomes a volume war. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So the idea of range becomes extremely important. Where are we going to play those chords? If I'm playing with a guitar player and he's playing here, then I'm going to move my chords up and I'm going to play here. Now again, this doesn't sound great on its own, but when you play it with these other notes, and if the bass player was playing this note, it would all sound good together. So let me play the bass part and then hold it with the sustain pedal. Here's the guitar player, and then here would be my part. That sounds good. Or I can leave these notes alone and just play these notes. And so instead of having a full sound by yourself, you have a full sound collectively. We're going to give you a quick demonstration about how to make sure that you're not playing in each other's range. So I'm going to play in the key of G, and Shawn's going to play a melody in my range and then play it out of my range, and you'll be able to hear how much louder it is if we're not playing the same notes. 2, 3, 4. Now she's going to move it out of my range. gets quite a bit louder, although she's not playing any louder, just because we're no longer playing the same notes. Now in this example, I'm going to play my chords high, that when she plays low, you'll be able to hear that better. So here we go. 2, 3, 4. Not necessarily that high is always loud or clear. It's a matter of where is the chords, where are those notes being played, and then finding the range so that way you're in your own space. Alright, so we're here with family and we're going to talk about what happens when you sing or play the same note. Ready? Now you can't tell which one of us is singing in particular because we're all singing the same note and running out of breath. But as soon as Shawn sings a different note, suddenly she stands out of the crowd. So it's important that we don't sing or play the same notes if we want to be heard.
We're going to talk about playing without rhythm. It's very difficult to not want to play rhythm, and when you play, you just want to add rhythm because you hear it and you feel it. When you're playing with a group, you have to be okay with letting someone else carry the rhythm. So it's almost too simple, and all you have to do when you're just playing chords is just play the chord. So when you play without rhythm on a keyboard, you can play a pad sound or a synth sound that has absolutely no rhythm at all. There's no hit when you play the keys. It's just the sound and it's sustained. And so you just change the chord and you play very minimal notes. So it's just usually the ones and the fives, 2 or 3 fingers at the most. And there's no rhythm. It's just the sustained chord.
Hey, this is Steve. I'm here with Shawn. We're going to talk to you about melody. Melody is one note played right after another. So that's a melody, but there's also a melody on your vocals. Do 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 do. So it's any note played right after another. Now when we get together as a team, what we want to do is have one melody being played at a time. So if I play a melody in the key of G, Shawn would then respond with, and then I would play, so it's a call and a response, a give and a take. What would happen is if we both played those melodies at the same time, it would sound like this. Now some of those notes worked well together, but many of those notes did not work well together. And so that's why we only want to do one melody at a time within our team. It makes it to where every note works together well. Now this is also true when we talk about vocals. Vocals have the melody, and so when they sing, other instruments should not be playing melody. So if we use the song Glorious, I'll sing, it goes like this. You're God of the heavens, you're God of my heart. So when I sing, then I sing. When I'm done, she plays, and then when she's done, I sing. If we were to do both of those on top of each other, if I were to sing when she's supposed to be playing and she plays when I'm supposed to be singing, it would sound like this. You're God of the heavens, oh yes you are, you are. You're God of my heart. Okay, that sounded terrible. So that's why when we play melody, one person has the melody at a time, and then that is given and taken back within the different parts. And it's not always the same instrument. So one time the vocalist would sing and the piano player would take the melody, the vocalist would sing again, and the next time the guitar player would take the melody. Simple parts working together, making beautiful music. So in this section we're going to talk about putting all of those 3 things together: rhythm, chords, and melody. So when I play the song by myself, I do all of those as much as I'm capable. So using our song Glorious, it goes like this. Now that sounds pretty good. But again, I'm doing all of the things by myself. Rhythm, chords, and melody. Now when we start adding people to our team, like a piano, they get the rehearsal CD and they go home and practice, and this is what it sounds like. But when we put together my part that sounds really good and her part that sounds really good, it sounds like this. 2, 3, 4. Now that doesn't sound horrible, but we're starting to lose things. At this point, you can no longer hear the melody that I'm playing, because Shawn is playing the exact same melody in her right hand. You're also not able to hear my notes as much because we're playing the same chords, because she's playing the same chords. So really all that you can hear is the slap of my strings. So let's do that again and focus on what it is that you can hear. Ready? 2, 3, 4. Now that further gets compounded by how many more people we have on our team. So if we have another acoustic guitar player or electric player or some other instrument, we're going to start being able to hear less and less and less. To take this example one step further, we're going to add a drummer. He's going to be playing the cajon, which is a box that you sit on that replicates a kick and a snare. Now when he gets the rehearsal CD, if he goes home and plays it, he's going to play it like this. Cajon solo. So if we were all to play the same thing together, it'll sound like this. 2, 3, 4. Now again, all of those things sounded good by themselves, but now you can probably not hear me at all. And that's because the sound of the hit of my strings is now being covered by the slap of the cajon. So all you can hear is the tone from the piano and the slap of the cajon, and I disappear completely. So what we have to do is, instead of doing things that sound good on their own, we have to work together as a team. And that means we divide up the 3 basic parts: chords, rhythm, and melody. Now how we normally do this song is that I take the melody, and I'll be playing that today on the acoustic. Shawn will play the chords, and Taylor will cover the rhythm. And it goes like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. Now with just a small change and us doing very simple parts, you're now able to hear every single one of us very clearly. And you will also notice that the volume came way down. And that's because we're no longer competing to be heard by using only volume. So now that's one way to do this song. Let's mix it up and do it another way. This time I'll take the chords, and Shawn will take the melody, Taylor will continue with the rhythm. Ready? 2, 3, 4. So when we start dividing up the different parts amongst our players, you'll notice that the parts get really simple. Whereas before, I was doing my best to play all 3, rhythm, chords, and melody. Now, because all I have is the melody, my part is this. Now, you don't have to be a great guitar player in order to play this. It's 2 notes. So we're moving from doing a whole lot to doing simple parts super well. And it's at this point that I can focus on how well am I playing those notes, the tone of those notes, and making sure that my timing is right. Playing parts also allows me to play things that I wouldn't normally be able to play if I was busy playing the rhythm and the chords. When I play rhythm and chords, the melody I have to play is this, which is not the actual melody, but it's all I can do because I'm busy playing the chords and the rhythm. The actual melody is this. Now that part is very simple, but it's impossible to play while I'm playing the other parts. So you're playing less, but you're playing it far better. So I'm here with Taylor, and we're going to talk to you about complementary rhythm. So complementary is always straight, and it's played at a volume lower than the regular rhythm. So on a guitar, it would sound like this. Or if you're playing open chords, quarter notes, it could sound like this. Which all those parts don't sound very good, but if we put them together with rhythm, then they work together very well. Now complementary rhythm on a cajon or a drum set would be 4 on the floor, which would be kick, kick. Or you could add kick, snare, kick, snare, kick. So when you get into then you've left complementary rhythm and now are doing regular rhythm. Now it's very tempting to want to join the rhythm that's being played by somebody else on your team, but your job is just to play a straight rhythm. If you're playing guitar, it would be all downs. And not play, even though that's what you hear in your head, you have to let it be played by somebody else on your team, and then you work together with that. So to show you how that works and how it works together, we're going to play just a simple chord progression here and trade back and forth between complementary and regular rhythm. So I'll start off with rhythm. Taylor will take the complementary rhythm. 2, 3, 4. We'll switch, and I'll take 8 notes. We'll switch again, and we'll take kick and snare. I'll have the rhythm. Now at this point you can add in the last variation, which is either triplets or accents. So he'll go kick, 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 snare. So that's the difference between rhythm and complementary rhythm. For just a minute we're going to talk about the 5th section of music, and that is counter melody. Counter melody can be a very useful tool, however it can make a huge mess all at the same time if you don't know how to use it. Now melody is defined as one note right after another, and the same is true for counter melody, one note right after another. Now harmony is not counter melody. Harmony is actually chords, because you're singing a melody that goes up, down, down. And your harmony is matching that as well, going at the same interval, whatever interval you like your harmonies to be at, following and mirroring the movement of that melody. Counter melody is when one note goes up, the other melody goes down, or up, or way up, or down, and yet it all seems to work together. Now this can be a very useful tool, but it also cannot be improvised. Your ability and anybody's ability to do counter melody must be pre-scripted, because it's so easy to make mistakes, and if you play a note that doesn't work well with another note, it sounds terrible. So for the purposes of this video, we're not going to go into depth on counter melody because it is so complicated. But what you need to know is that it's not something that you should use in your team unless you're going to write it out ahead of time, make sure it works with all the other parts, and play that exact part every single time the exact same way. So what I want to talk to you about now is simplicity of part and complexity of orchestration. When you start looking at the parts that we actually need to play during a song, they're simple. They're actually almost too simple. What actually becomes the challenging part is knowing what to play and when to play it. And this is especially true the more people that you add to your team. So if you have 2 people, you play this, I'll play this, you pretty much get to play all the time. But if you start adding your 3rd or your 4th or 5th, and if you get into, most teams have anywhere from 10 to 12 to 14 people or more, it gets very difficult to actually make sound that works together. And this coordination of what to play, who plays what, when you play it, is what we call in the music world orchestration. Now certainly that applies to orchestras because it's so many people that if you just let them play whatever they wanted, or hey, I'll just make something up on the oboe, it's going to sound horrific. And so that's what makes Mozart and Bach and Beethoven, all those guys, ridiculously talented and amazing, is that they were able to write these very complicated parts that worked in perfect unity with every other person in the team. And you put that sheet music in front of an orchestra and they're able to play it. Now the problem is that very few of us know anything about orchestration. And that's because if you join an orchestra, a choir, a band, all they teach you is here's the music that somebody else who's a genius wrote, and you learn how to see the orchestration and mimic the orchestration, but not taught how do I compose, how do I make that happen. And because every team across the country is different, some people have 2 acoustic guitars, some people have pianos, they have different styles. We're taking the same music and trying to apply it to our situation and our team. We have to become good at orchestration, otherwise we're going to have chaos. So what this means is that you don't need individually talented people to make a great team. We have to find people that can play well together, and we have to find somebody on our team that can understand orchestration. And so I'm going to do this weatherman style here, but we're going to bring up a chart. Here it is. Ready? And go. Chart. I'm sure you understand everything now just based on the awesomeness of this chart that's right there. And so what we want to see is over here on this side we see individual talent. And if we have one person playing, we want to have that person doing it as best as they possibly can. So they play all the notes, they play the chords, the rhythm, the melody, the complementary rhythm, and the counter melody if they're able. But what happens is that as you add another player, that person needs to play less than they're capable. When we say less is more, that's what we're asking you to do. Instead of hitting all of your strings, you only hit some of your strings. So you don't play all the chords, the rhythm, the melody, the complementary, and you only play part of it. Now that is again fighting your instincts as an individual musician, because many people, especially classically trained musicians, have spent years and years and years trying to do as much as they can individually because that's impressive and it's award-winning and people, oh wow, you're talented. But when we come into a team space, the more people that we add, the less and less that we actually have to do individually as far as skill. And so the more people we have, and I only ran this out to a few people, and most of you have way more people than that on your team, you're playing far less than you're capable. Simple parts, but as you can see, this other curve then starts to go up in the complexity of the orchestration. Knowing when to play and what to play and who's going to do it. That's the part that gets difficult, and what you'll have to spend a lot of time working on and reviewing this video and looking at our other videos and finding out, okay, how do we put these principles into place? Because I understand them, maybe I can hear them, but how do we divvy all these things up? That's where we have an increase in our orchestration. Now, when we have one person playing, the orchestration is pretty simple. You play as much as you possibly can, make it sound good. But as you start adding those more people, all of a sudden we have a very rapid rise in the amount of complexity of the orchestration. And this is exponentially true when you start adding more and more people onto your team, if you want them to be heard. Now what's also amazing is that the kind of people that you're looking for when you look at this chart. If you only have 1 or 2 people on your team, you need people with a certain amount of skill in order for that to sound good. However, if you have a lot of people on your team, You're only looking for people to have a little bit of skill. Now, what's challenging is that people that have a lot of individual skill often struggle when there's more people on the team and when orchestration becomes important because they have to play far less than they're capable. So whereas somebody who has a lot of individual talent would play the song like this, when they become part of the team, all that they're asked to play is this. Or not to play at all, and that can be very confusing or very difficult to do emotionally or mentally if you spend a lot of your life learning how to do as much as you're humanly capable of doing. So the other idea about playing simple parts is that it allows people that are in your congregation that you know to be a part of your team. Well, I can't really play guitar very well. It doesn't matter if you can't play it very well, it's can you play a part very well? Can you play just this? Well, hey, you could be a great member of our team. Those people are sitting in your congregation every week, but you're gonna have to understand and be able to tell them this is specifically what you play. They're not going to be able just to know. Just the same way as the person that's individually talented, they're not going to know what to play either. So let's learn how to put those people to work. I hope that's encouraging. So when we start working together as a team versus playing music individually, we have a few things that we have to overcome. The number one thing is that we try and do everything that we can by ourselves. We try to make the music as much as we have ability to do. This will always be something that you'll have to fight against and work on because we have a desire on the inside of us that we hear it and we want to play it. So you have to learn how to let other people play those parts that you hear in your head and only play the part that you're supposed to play. That sounds really easy, but it's a little challenging. The other natural tendency is that you want your sound to sound amazing and full. We just want a full sound. The problem with that is that it's so full that there's no room for anyone else. And so you really have to work on playing stuff that doesn't sound great on its own, but will sound great when you put it together. So your part has to pass what we call the stupid test. If what you play does not sound stupid on its own, then you're probably not doing it right. Now this applies to how many notes you play. It also applies to the tone that you use to play those notes. So we don't want to have a full sound individually, we want to have a full sound collectively. It can get to where your sound is so full that it's like putting a whole bunch of sumo wrestlers into a phone booth. There's only so much space that we have as a group for people to be able to be heard. And if we're all really big, it's going to be difficult for everyone to fit in. So in this section, we're going to cover how do we pass around the different parts. Now, as I've said before, we're going to leave out the counter melody. But what we have is rhythm, melody, chords, and complementary rhythm. So we also have Michael here who's going to join us on the bass. So I'm going to start, we're going to just play G to C, and I'm going to start with rhythm and chords. Now at this point there's room for a melody and room for complementary rhythm. So Shawn's going to play melody, making sure she's not in my range. And Taylor's going to join us on the complementary rhythm, which will all be straight. go. Different variations, different options for the different parts of the song. And that was only 2 chords played over and over again. So a very important part of making this all work is how we monitor. In other words, how do we hear ourselves when we're playing together as a team? Because nobody plays the wrong part on purpose. Everyone's playing the best that they know how and trying to make what they play by themselves sound amazing. So what happened is, because we couldn't hear ourselves, we then add monitors to the stage. Now at the beginning it was only 1 mix, but because we're all still playing the same parts, the chords, the rhythm, the melody, the complementary rhythm, we still can't hear ourselves. So this gave rise to having separate mixes. So instead of having 1 speaker, we would have 4 speakers or 5 speakers. And each person would have their own in front of them, and somebody was controlling those speakers from the sound booth. A little bit more of me, can I get a little bit more, This only added volume to the stage. So now there's so much volume on the stage because we're fighting, but still playing the same parts. That then led to problems of where we need to reduce the stage volume. This gave rise to the in-ear monitor phenomenon that we are still currently in. So instead of having a speaker on the ground, now we have speakers that are in our ears. And because the sound people got tired of responding to all the requests for a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that, we now have the individual mixes controlled by the players. This eliminates a lot of conflict and a lot of communication back and forth, but what happens is that now the only person who controls what this person hears is that person. And because of our self-preservation tendencies, and because we truly believe that what we're playing sounds good and is the right part, we start to change how we hear and what we listen to, but we're doing it at an individual level. For me as a guitar player, I turn down the other things that are causing conflict that don't sound as good. And so I'm creating an artificial world where this person here is on my team, but I don't like what they're playing, and so I turn it down. Now they have no idea that I'm turning them down, but I'm not even playing with them even though they're on my team. Now other people are doing that to you as well, and so we have this really weird mixture of this person's listening to somebody else, but they're not listening to either one of us. And so it's very hard to work together when we're not even listening to each other anymore, and no one has control over that. So I'm not here to talk bad about in-ear monitors, because it is theoretically possible for you to use them correctly. However, the reason why most people use in-ear monitors is because they can't hear themselves, or they want to avoid the conflict of interacting with their sound team. And neither of those 2 reasons are the real reasons why you should use them. So over the course of time, because we can't hear ourselves and because we want to avoid conflict, we've changed our environment rather than changing our parts. And so what happens is that we have used technology to make the wrong part sound right. And now, because we're not listening to each other, it's impossible for us to actually play the right part, because the right part sounds wrong and the wrong part sounds right. So it's imperative that we create a listening environment where the right part sounds right and the wrong part sounds wrong. Otherwise we can't make good decisions. For us, we use as minimal monitoring as possible. Usually when we practice with a full set of drums with no cage, we have all of our amps within 5 to 10 feet of each other. We don't use a microphone when we sing, because if we can't hear ourselves, then we're either playing too loud or we're doubling parts. Now we know that we can't hear ourselves, and so we make adjustments. We don't just say, oh well, let's increase the volume. Now this forces us into becoming better musicians, to doing part checks and saying, what are you playing? What are you playing? What are you playing? What are you playing? Oh really, we're both doubling this, okay. And then trying it again and seeing, does that fix the problem? And then when it does, then now we've become better musicians. So I know a lot of that's hard to take, especially if you really love your in-ear monitors, because it does sound amazing. You live in a virtual world and it's everything that you could want and more. However, you're the only one that hears that, and you have no hope or knowledge of whether or not you're even on in the main system. If you want to work together as a team, you need to make sure that you're using your in-ears for the right purpose, which is to hear everybody else and you have to have a lot of feedback between your sound person and you to know if what you're playing sounds right. And if you've chosen to use in-ear monitors to avoid conflict, it requires more interaction to use in-ears correctly than less interaction. So whether or not you use monitors at all, floor wedges, individual mixes, or in-ear monitors, create an environment where you can tell whether or not you're working together. You can tell whether or not what you're playing actually sounds good or not. So another important aspect about monitoring is to be in mono. Now most in-ear monitor systems have the ability to run in stereo. That means you have control over what you hear in your left speaker versus what you hear in your right speaker. And this is also true for recordings on the radio, on CDs, or whatever device we're listening to now here in the future. Now why we do that is because it creates clarity. If two things are exactly the same and we put them right next to each other, well, we can't see them or hear them anymore. But if I put one sound to the left and one sound to the right, now I have clarity. The reason why sound systems should be in mono for live is that your listeners are not always in the center. And that's why headphones work so well. You have sound on this side, you have sound on this side, and you're in the middle controlling where you are. When you're in an auditorium or a church congregation, wherever you happen to be, your listener is not always in the middle. You have listeners that are sitting on the left, and you have listeners that are sitting on the right, and listeners sitting in the front. So what happens is if you use that stereo field in your mixing, and you put this guitar plate over here and this guitar plate over here, and you have one tom here, one tom here, one tom there, well, it sounds great in the very back and in the middle, but if you're anywhere on the sides and the further forward you are, it sounds incomplete and can actually sound quite terrible. So we put our system into mono so that everyone has an opportunity to hear the same sound no matter where you're sitting. And why I'm going to set great links to talk about it is that if the band is monitoring in stereo and living in stereo, and the congregation is only hearing mono, what happens is that the parts that you think sound amazing actually sound terrible or cannot be heard in the mono world. So we have to make sure that what we're doing for our monitors matches what we're doing in the house, otherwise we're going to be making poor decisions. Not because we're terrible musicians, but because our environment is not helping us make good decisions. Hey, thanks again for joining us. I know that's a lot of information to take in, but that's why we put it on the video, so you can go back and go back and go back again. But if you have more questions, please look us up, stevenshawn.com or musicandministry.co, and we'd be glad to answer your questions. Look for future training videos, as well as our books, 72% Cocoa, A Practical Guide to Worship, and any of the other ones that I've written since then, and certainly our music. Thanks again, and God bless. There's a lot of worship leaders who lead from an acoustic guitar, and they want their music to feature the sound of the acoustic guitar. Now that's great, but when you start putting instruments together that don't work well with an acoustic guitar, what can easily happen is that the acoustic guitar actually gets drowned out, or drummers get frustrated and have to be caged or play with specialty sticks because they're not playing parts that work well together. So we're going to talk about how do we orchestrate in order to feature that acoustic guitar. So the acoustic guitar is actually a fairly fragile instrument, not in construction or the body shape, but in the sound that it produces. Because it's so highly percussive in the sense of how you pluck and hit the strings, that sound is a big part of how you hear the acoustic guitar. And then along with that is the tone. And the tone is really not that loud. We have to protect those two things. We have to protect the percussive sound of you hitting the strings with your pick or plucking them with your fingers, and we have to protect the tone, the notes, because both of those sounds can easily be covered over by the other instruments that would be playing with you. If I play in the key of G, you can hear me just fine. However, when Shawn begins to play, and if she plays the same notes that I play, all of a sudden all that you'll be able to hear is the slap of my strings. Ready, 2, 3, 4. Now that again is because and because the sound of the guitar, this note is not a very strong sound. Now when we play with the drummer who's playing a regular drum set, drummers have to make sure that they don't play the cymbals, and especially don't play the cymbals in the same rhythm as the acoustic guitar player. Otherwise, you won't be able to hear them. So if we play together, 2, 3, 4. Now all that you can hear is just the tone of my instrument and not the slap. So if we combine both of these players and all play together, you won't be able to hear me at all. 2, 3, 4. Now you can hear me just fine, but that's because everybody else quit. So the problem isn't with volume, the problem is I have things that are covering the sounds of what I'm playing. So for drummers, you have to not play the cymbals pretty much at all. Now what you can use them for is an occasional accent, a little roll here and there, but if you hit them much at all, you're going to be covering that sound. As a result, most drummers then try to play quieter by using either different sticks, or they put themselves into a cage or get put into a cage, but they're still playing the same part, only quieter. And that doesn't actually fix the problem. What you need to do is not play the same rhythm. Now this is also why the cajon works so well with the acoustic guitar, because it eliminates the cymbals altogether. And so all you have is kick and snare. Now what most drummers make the mistake of doing is that they play the same rhythm parts just on the other parts of the cajon, and it doesn't actually work well together. Or they try and add in either shakers or cymbals or have some other sort of contraption to make that cymbal sound that they hear in their head and want to play, but it needs to come from that acoustic guitar. You also have to choose instruments that work well with the range of an acoustic guitar. So a bass or a cello would be good because they can play notes below what an acoustic guitar can. Also, choosing a melody instrument that would be higher than the range of an acoustic guitar is a good idea because most acoustic players don't play melody. So put the right people on your team so you can play the right parts.